Good afternoon, everyone. I'll now call the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee meeting to order. This meeting's being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. Prior to moving into the delegation with Mr. McGosh of Theatre of the Bay, I would like to run through the items for discussion to see if members of committee would like to deal with them on consent or to hold them for discussion. Items that are not held will be deemed approved by consent with no further discussion. They will then move forward to the next general committee meeting for consideration. So the first item was from the deferred item, actually. There's one deferred item from March 24th, the Finance and Responsible Governance meeting concerning memorandum from A. Keir, Business Performance Specialist, dated February 21st, 2024, regarding the key performance indicators for Council's 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. Is there, please? And that's held by Deputy Mayor Thompson. And the next one, when we work our way down to 6, which is report of the advisory committees. Next, we have the report of the advisory committees to be received. 6.1, which is the report of the International Relations Committee dated April 16th, 2024. Can I have a member of committee put it on the floor to be received? Or is it being held at all? No?
I'll put it on the floor.
Okay. And does anybody wish to hold it, or is it just being passed on consent? And that passes on consent. The next one is reports of officers of the corporation. Next, there is one report of the officers of the corporation. 7.1, which is 2024 Q1 internal audit status update. And that is approved on consent. Number 9, community project submission. There were 2 community project submissions to be discussed by Councillor Morales regarding the planting of mature spruce trees at the intersection of Stundon Lane and Mapleview Drive East, and the installation of an automated external defibrillator at Painswick Park.
Could we deal with those separately, please, Mr. Chair? 9.1 and 9.3.
I guess that'd be 9.1 and 9.2. Yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
9.2, not 9.3.
Yep. So first, we'll deal with 9.1, which is the community project fund submission in regards to the planting of mature spruce trees at the intersection of Stundon and Mapleview Drive East. Does anybody care to hold?
I can hold that if it gets it on the floor for a motion.
You know, that's not how it works. I think is it not just approved if it's not held?
Yeah, it's just approved. It doesn't necessarily need to be held, Councillor Congle. It was
That's
just
great.
a matter of
Thanks,
somebody...
that's what you were doing, but I wasn't sure in how you framed that last one. So I wanted to make sure it was tabled so we could motion on it. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that approves on consent. And then 9.2, which is the second community project by Councillor Morales, installation of an automated external defibrillator, AED at Painswick Park.
And I'll hold that, please.
And that's held by Mayor Nuttall. And then we will backtrack to our open delegation. So we have one open delegation to be received this evening by Mr. McGosh, representing Theatre by the Bay. I would now call upon Mr. McGosh to approach the podium to deliver your open delegation. And just as a reminder, you do have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair Harvey and members of the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee. My name is Ian Mogash, and I'm the Artistic Director of Theatre by the Bay. Joining me is the Chair of our Board of Directors, Doug Jouer. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening and on Shakespeare's 460th birthday, no less. Theatre by the Bay, or TBTB for short, is a professional theatre company dedicated to producing plays about Barrie and the surrounding community, supporting Barrie and regional artists, showcasing Barrie as a community and the downtown of Barrie as a place of vibrancy, creativity, and opportunity. Informally, we've been referred to as Barrie's Theatre Company or Barrie's Storytellers due to our uniquely local focus. Our work has been celebrated by a broad range of community sectors, such as being recognized with 2 Barrie Business Awards, including the 2021 Not-for-Profit Charitable Organization of the Year, 2 Mayor's Innovation Awards, as well as awards for our contributions to Barrie's tourism and heritage. There we go. In spite of our continued success, including increasing our organizational capacity by approximately 140% since 2019, Theatre by the Bay is requesting urgent assistance. A combination of pandemic-related factors led to Theatre by the Bay carrying a deficit. After a deficit reduction plan was created in 2022, we reduced that deficit by 1/3 in 2023 and acted aggressively to eliminate it before 2025. 2025 is important as it marks the next time we can apply for operating funding from the Canada Council for the Arts, which, if unsuccessful, means the next opportunity would be 2028. And the last time we applied for operating funding, Theatre by the Bay's deficit was considered enough of a liability for our application to be dismissed. However, earlier this year, we also did not receive a Canada Council project grant for a production that we felt was as confident a submission as could be submitted by our company, and was told in a letter by the CEO of the Canada Council that the project grant success has shrunk to 16% and will likely stay at that level going forward, while also reducing application opportunities to 1 per year. To make matters even more complicated, the Canada Council does not provide feedback on its project grant applications, meaning we have no sense of what was well received or needs to change in the future. And thus, Theatre by the Bay has been faced with an overwhelming challenge: cover the granting shortfall and work to eliminate our deficit in the same year, or risk being stuck in a granting pool that is increasingly harder to access. The only conclusion for which, if our luck in a 16% granting pool were to run dry, would be that the company would struggle to operate, if not cease to operate, in the next 2 years. As several fundraising initiatives overseen by our new chair, Doug Jour, gather momentum, we felt it necessary to turn to the City of Barrie for support at this juncture. We are extremely grateful to the city for its Arts and Culture Investment Grant Program that has supported arts organizations like Theatre by the Bay since, I believe, 2009. But at this critical juncture, the help of council, your support, your advice, and your solutions are necessary for Barrie's Theatre Company to continue to do the meaningful work that has led to watershed moments for our community. For example, our productions of We Must Have More Men and the Cenotaph Project, where more than 1,500 high school students from across the county learned about local figures like Ernst Hanmer and Victor D'Ambrosio, for whom, of course, City has named streets. Or more recently, our community may not have had the opportunity to recognize and celebrate the remarkable contributions and achievements of Bobby Rosenfeld. Theatre by the Bay is requesting a minimum of $50,000 to support our operations this year. That amount was the amount of our unsuccessful Canada Council project grant. An alternative that I've been speaking to with several councillors would be around $68,000, which is our current deficit. Support could go towards reducing our deficit or delivering our 2024 programming that was compromised by our granting shortfall at the discretion of council. As always, we are open to collaborate with the city to find the best solutions so that Theatre by the Bay can return to what it does best: supporting local artists, sharing Barrie stories, and perhaps one day putting Barrie stories and artists on the world stage. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and Mayor Nuttall wants to start off with the questions.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation. And I have to be honest with the rest of council, when you said, should we ask for an extension to the presentation or not? Because you covered a lot of information in a very short time. I said, don't ask for the extension. Let the committee and members of council ask questions, because I think that'll dive into where everyone getting the comfortable information they need going forward. So just being honest with the rest of council here that you received a lot in a short period of time because of me.
That said, I'd be happy to share my presentation with any member of council who wants to look at it.
100%.
If that would be helpful.
100%.
Great.
So I guess there's two pieces, and I'm understanding a little bit of this
Yeah.
right now, which is why you did the presentation. There's two pieces. One is that there's a deficit over here, and then there's an operating shortfall over here. So your deficit is, I think you said 67,000, call it a hangover from COVID. Then you've got an operational, I guess, deficit for this year of about $50,000. How would, if we were to determine, you said we could support either way or, you know, whatever's at our discretion, how would we know that the money put aside for the deficit to eliminate it doesn't result in another deficit come the end of 24, and then you're unable to apply for those dollars under the Canada
Council for the Arts.
Council for the Arts again next year?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall. That's an important question. I think what we would probably need to do is set aside that funding for the end of the year to ensure that there isn't that shortfall. And I mean, that said, there are a couple emergency expenses that we would need to put some of that to so as to set us up for success, but we would ensure that as much of that as possible was put aside specifically to ensure that at the end of our fiscal year, there wasn't a deficit.
And you and I talked about possibly a solution. So I'm gonna ask you first, and then I'm gonna ask Stephanie. And I think Bryn and I had the opportunity to have the same conversation, I think, last week. With relation to your money that you're receiving from the City of Barrie through the arts grants, it's been an average of something around $30,000 to $35,000. Is that correct?
The highest we've ever received is 34, but yes. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the lowest you received just in the last, like, call it 5 years?
I believe 24 in 2019 or 2018, something like that.
Okay. And then it kind of escalated up from 24 to 34.
34, yeah, as a result of our organizational capacity growth.
Okay. So really it's just going on what you're purporting, somewhere around $29,000 is the average over the past number of years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Stephanie might be able to address that more specifically, but I believe so. Yes.
Okay. And if there was let's say there was a funding of the deficit, okay? Because that's spent dollars to me. Would you be allergic to the next 2 years of your, whatever those grants are, because they're not controlled by the city, they're controlled by a separate, which you know, because you sit on it, to repay those dollars back to the city?
Sorry, would you repeat that?
So in the sense that, would you be open to us funding the deficit, but then over the next 2 years, the dollars that are allocated to you would refund back to the city? I
see. Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall, we would certainly be open to that.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, is it okay if I ask Mr. Schlichter now? Same. Mr. Schlichter, we are not the givers of the dough. We set a rate or an amount, and then it's handed out by a third party organization through Invest Barrie and our culture department. Is there an opportunity from where you sit to do just that, rather than, you know, I always get nervous about either lending or just jumping in and handing out, because I think it opens the floodgates, but there is a projected set of dollars based on the past number of years. Are you allergic to lending and then having the city get repaid by those dollars that would be coming out of our arts grants?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall. The Arts and Culture Investment Fund, the fund total, is established annually through our business plan process for which council approves. Based on that envelope, that is what becomes part of the program that has a a set of requirements and application guidelines. It is then independently adjudicated, and as part of that scoring and adjudication process, organizations are allocated funding. There is no guarantee that Theatre by the Bay would be in that historic funding envelope. That said, there's nothing to say that they wouldn't be, but it is based on scoring and independent adjudication. So to lend in advance, I think being fair and transparent, there would always be an element of risk. That said, they have typically and historically been successful through the grants program. And over the past 5 years, you can see what that amount is at. So that is a potential. It just would be, I can't say what adjudication group is going to apply the funds to. And I wouldn't want to assign them to that value.
And I guess maybe to you or maybe to the CAO or the clerk, if we determined a number of years we're wanting to have this paid back to us, if committee and then council and so on and so forth approved it, is there a way to hold back that amount? So let's say we know they haven't received less than $20,000 in the past, I don't know, 15 years or 10 years, however long it's been going. So we'll use the bottom number, and until that's paid back, there's no more funds allocated that go out the door. They go directly to repayment of said deficit loan.
Mayor Nuttall, through Councillor Harvey to Mayor Nuttall, perhaps Ms. Schlichter can comment on that. Otherwise, I have some thoughts.
Through Chair Harvey to Mayor Nuttall, if council were to adopt that type of approach, all the checks are processed through Invest Barrie once the adjudicators have allocated the funds. So if there was, for example, they were allocated $30,000 next year, and the determination from council tonight was that, $20,000 a year until it's paid back, a check would only be issued for the balance of $10,000, and then $20,000 would be part of that payback.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. Any other members of committee? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Thank you for the presentation. On slide 5, it says 30% of the audience is from outside Barrie.
Yes.
Do you receive any funding from outside Barrie?
We do. As sort of mentioned, we do have project grants through the Canada Council and the Ontario Arts Council that we present. However, regionally, there is a bit of a stink about Barrie organizations applying for Simcoe County funding, unless it's something related to regional tourism, like through the RTO, things like that.
Have you ever had a consideration of then maybe charging a premium of outside of Barrie tickets like we do in our rec centers?
We've not considered that, no.
Yeah, just, you're at council and it's funded from the Barrie taxpayer, but benefiting Simcoe County. And I understand the stigma that people don't like Barrie organizations applying for county money, which I fully understand. If you can maybe just elaborate a little bit more on the investment of 70% of your budget in local economy.
Absolutely. Sorry, through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Thompson. Yes, absolutely. So primarily that goes towards artist pay. So our local artist pay, that is the primary thing of our budget, but also towards local resources. So rentals, purchases, things like that as well. Part of that is our rental of the 5 Points Theatre as part of that portfolio, but it is reinvested in the community. And that's direct impact. That's also, of course, not the flow back to local restaurants and hotels and all those additional services that benefit from our operations.
I have a few more questions, but you know what? I'll take some of them offline and we'll speak after if that's okay with you. But what would be your main reason for the shortfall? Like, are you seeing a lack of an audience, or is it the bills are just getting,
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Thompson. It all at the end of the day, it comes down to this unsuccessful grant application, but in partnership with that, it's that we have several fundraising initiatives in place, but they're going to take time to come to fruition. Like for instance, fostering larger sponsorships, larger personal donations, that takes relationship building, which takes time. And certainly the pandemic affected our ability to foster those relationships as the company itself was going through a bit of a rebuilding. So those two things working in tandem are part of the reason.
My final question, and maybe just a comment, like when I see this and I see the troubles in the finance, and I get it, lots of people are struggling right now. And it worries me when we're trying to build a $100 million theater, and I look at, like, even though for a nonprofit, there's discounts and rental, like you build $100 million facility, there's still a rent cost and that, and it just, I would love to know the way forward where we're not relying on grant money or, is it something else? So maybe we'll have a conversation off, but it's when I see this report and I think of the optics, we're trying to get our residents behind, theaters, and, it's a large, investment in arts and theater. But then when you look, you wonder if it's sustainable right now. So like I said, I'll speak to you after, and like I said, we can maybe go over some of the.
I'd love to speak to that just briefly now.
Please.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Thompson. So that is a totally valid perspective. However, we're just one of at least 25 organizations in the city of Barrie, several of whom have been thriving in the last few years. So it is a bit of a theater by the bay issue right now. However, I mean, there are still lots of communities that are investing in performing arts centers at the moment. Like I just read the other day that the city of Fredericton, with a population of fewer than 63,000, has already begun work on an $82 million facility that was actually very similar in size and community hub in nature as the exact one that was presented by the Performing Arts Center Task Force. So we're not necessarily the norm. Absolutely, the arts are in a bad way across the sector right now. But I think there's lots of stories of hope, even within our own community. And this should not be taken as a litmus test of the amazing work that's happening by our arts sector right now.
Chair Harvey, just on one thing you said. So I'm really hoping, you said there's some sectors or some organizations that are doing really well. And I know how tight the community is. And like I said, I sat on the theater task force. I really hope that you're collaborating to see what's working for them, because, some people say, like, I don't want a council to be, we're not the easy button, right? We've got to invest in things that, have a return, and like, whether it's not always financial, it's cultural, it's everything. And you guys do great work. So I hope that you're collaborating with the others and seeing what's working for them. So.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Thompson. I mean, I helped to found the Barrie Arts Alliance specifically for that reason. Getting opportunities for local arts groups and leaders to work together on various projects. And we have seen some successes in that. I mean, it led to the establishment of the Arts Advisory Committee, which is now a feature of council, and, and many other initiatives that I could point to. So we are absolutely in those conversations. And thank you for your perspective. And I look forward to our conversations.
All right, thank you. Any other members of committee? Councillor Congal.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate the presentation and know we've received it in our agenda packages, but I wanted to ask a question about your reference to the next 2 years. And I think it was you identified that without some assistance, with that very significant constraint around, I believe, what used to be a pretty reliable grant source, that it's looking like a bit of a 2-year window if you're not able to achieve that. So while you're identifying the $50,000 shortfall in operations and the $68,000 current deficit, is that a rolling deficit? So if you're able to manage the deficit this year, are you forecasting that to be also a similar deficit for the following year? Or what is your fund development strategy While I do appreciate that that takes some time, and great to hear that you've been proactive about starting to facilitate some of those relationships, when do you expect to start seeing an influx in funding, or is this just a 1 year current emergency gap that you have, or is this something that's going to roll over in the next year to 2 years?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Kungle. That's an important question. For not-for-profits, of course, it's not like a one-and-one, it's a multi-pronged effort. So, you know, if we don't get this this support and we're stuck in the project grant cycle, then we're looking at the reality that our fundraising committee and the work on fundraising from personal donations and things like that will have to continue to make up for that. So we do have a deficit plan in place. It started in 2022. We've already reduced it by 1/3. But if we are stuck in this one application, 50,000 with no note system instead of moving up to operating funding next year, then that's where it becomes increasingly challenging, because the question will become, can we foster those relationships fast enough to make up for the potential reality of 2 years without grants from the Canada Council at all if we don't get operating funding? And I, just from my experience with the granting system and the realities of the company, I don't foresee a world where that's possible and still deliver programming of the type that we've been able to. Does that answer your question?
It does. And can you, I'm arm's length from the process for the grant that you get through the city, where you've been successful, it seems, at least since 2018. Can you identify, have you been receiving the money you've applying for, or has it been less than what you've asked? So has your ask typically been between the $29,000 to $34,000? And would you foresee to be going into the next intake of that grant with a higher ask to support operations?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Kungle. No, we never get the full ask. We always ask for approximately 49,000, and we've never ever received that ever.
And what has been the feedback? Is that because there's administrative dollars tied into that, or is that, do you get feedback from our grant process?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Kungle. We actually received phenomenal notes from the jury. The response overall is that this is a company that's doing hugely impactful work for the community, that the artistic excellence and community outreach is high, that our educational programs are virtually unparalleled for a community of our size, and that the mandate works. So I think ultimately just comes down to the fact that there are so many deserving organizations fighting over a specific size that all have different needs. And just as some of you may or may not be aware, like in the last granting cycle, there were 25 organizations that applied for funding and only 15 actually got funding. And that's just the City of Barrie. So I think it's just, there are lots of organizations and fighting over a certain amount of money. And our growth in terms of our success with the City of Barrie grants can actually pretty well be tied with the growth of the overall portfolio.
Thank you. And next question, could you clarify for me again between the operation and the deficit? So if you, trying to work to cover over $100,000 then, what are you planning for operating that would be at risk if you didn't at least get $50,000 to cover that? Is that canceling performances? Because I know there's quite a lot of merit. You've very quickly highlighted that, but I've seen broader presentations too around just how you're bringing in heritage conversations and the history of Barrie into performances. And you've gotten like CBC radio, broadcasting awareness and lots of media attention that has done a nice job focusing on the heritage and history of Barrie. So can you share a little bit about what's the impact when we talk about operations?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Kungle. It would be pretty harsh. I mean, we would almost certainly have to cancel a production, which reduces our ability to also fundraise for things like sponsorships. Like if you don't have much to offer people, and especially like in some of our conversations with sponsors, we've already presented to them what we have in mind and they are buying into that, then you lose that potential fundraising on that side as well. But I also think it's important that the impact wouldn't just be on Theatre by the Bay. I mean, we're the #1 employer of local theater artists in this city by far. And so like for those artists that rely on us in terms of paying themselves as artists in this area, it's really falls on us and our ability to operate that allows for that payment. And then also there's the community impact for the downtown. Like our 2023 season, we had 2,450 people over 33 days in the 5 Points Theater downtown. Like that, like if we were to lose a third of that, say, because we have to cancel one production, that's 11 fewer performance days for local restaurants, for the local downtown as well. And so the effects of it would be far reaching. It wouldn't just be for us, but really it would be, a tree without one of its major branches and a significantly compromised company, which is why I'm doing this.
Thank you, Ian. I have no further questions and I appreciate your comments on mine.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go back to Mayor Nuttall for a follow-up.
Thanks. So in the $50,000 shortfall, you're saying essentially with that shortfall, you're going to have to cancel one of the productions.
Yes.
So if we, kill the deficit, which is what I'm inclined to do, you're saying that you'll still have to cancel that production.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall. What I'm saying is I believe Theatre by the Bay has the capacity to to either make up for that shortfall or move to eliminate our deficit, but not both. And so if one of them is taken care of, then we would have the ability to focus our fundraising efforts on the other. Does that answer the question?
So it's your belief that you will be able to raise the $50,000 for the production?
I do believe so, yes.
Okay.
And just before I go to non-committee members, just for a point of clarity to Ms. Cook, the clerk. Now, this isn't on the agenda as an actual item. So if members wanted to deal with this today, do they still have the ability, even though it's actually not on as an item for discussion, it's on as a presentation from an open delegation?
To members of the committee, you can certainly put a motion forward concerning the content of the open delegation.
Okay, great, thanks. So now I'll move to members of non-committee, and the first one I have is Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Harvey. Thank you, Ian, for the presentation. I got a chance to talk to you last week and ask a number of questions, so I appreciated it, but I appreciated the presentation today. And I think you've shown just what a vital role Theatre by the Bay plays in our community. So I'm very, very supportive of Theatre by the Bay. I saw Bobby. I didn't get a chance to see Iceman, but it was phenomenal. What I appreciated about today is you've done your due diligence. I mean, I shared a lot of the sentiments that Councillor or Deputy Mayor Thompson shared in terms of, we don't want to be seen as the bank, right? Mm-hmm. The first stop, let's go to the city, we need a bailout. And I talked to you about your sustainability plan. I talked to you about some of the changes you're making from a fundraising perspective. So I think all of that is in place and I'm comfortable with that. I also like the fact that you're flexible in terms of, a loan arrangement or what the support the City of Barrie is willing to provide. So I appreciated that aspect as well. My one question for you is the operational funding that you're hoping to seek from the Canada Council. What is the likelihood, like if we eliminate the deficit, what is the likelihood of success for receiving those operational dollars? And do you have an idea of what those operational dollars would amount to as well?
Through you, Councillor Harvey, to Councillor Hamilton. That's a really good question. I mean, certainly the odds would be much, much higher if the deficit was gone. We were literally told that is a major factor. I also think that we've never been in a stronger position organizationally to make a national case. Like we had a Governor General's award-winning playwright write a play for us, and we've got several other potential initiatives in the next few years that would really help to increase our national profile. Our Indie Producer Co-op, which is our theater producer training program, has brought in national participants to Barrie to work and learn here before going back to their respective communities. So I can't give you a percentage. I don't know what it is. But in terms of what the financial picture would look like, we've been told to anticipate about a project grant's worth in your first year. So about 50 to 60,000.
Thank you. And sorry, through you, and can you remind me, so the operational funding, you apply every year, or you apply in 2025 and then you get it every year until 2028, which you reapply again? Is that how the process
Through
works?
you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Hamilton. You apply every year, but if you're a new applicant, you can only go once every 3 years.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Well, again, I appreciate this. I am supportive. I do think we're at a bit of a, critical time frame here, because you do need to be in a position to be able to access operational funding. That just makes sense. So I'm not on the committee. I'm not a decision maker today, but I do hope that there's some willingness to work with you to look at different options, whether it's a loan. I think Stephanie also provided some emailed options, which I think are very realistic and viable. So I'll be interested to see what happens today. And just the last question, what is the timeline that you would need to apply for the 2025 operational funding? Is it important that we kind of get a move on this?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Hamilton. The application is not due until January of 2025, but our fiscal year ends at the end of September of this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And I'll just remind members to stick to their questions, and especially we got 16 minutes before our next meeting. I'll go to Councillor Rietman next.
Thank you, Chair Harvey, and I'll try to make it short. The deficit for you is $68,000.
Yes.
And you more or less get $34,000 from the city every year. Those, 2 times 34, that works, the math works out really nicely. The question that I have for you, and maybe it's also one for Ms. Schlichter, is if we were to advance you the 68,000, would you be in a position to agree not to apply to the city for funding for 2025 and 2026? And would that be survivable for you and a reasonable approach to it?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Riepma. That's an important question. If that is what would be needed to happen, then that's what we would be comfortable doing. The reality is that this funding is important. It's more important right now. Let's get through this right now and set ourselves up for success for this next application for the Canada Council, and we can deal with that as it comes, and certainly hopefully by that point several of our fundraising initiatives will be in place enough that we could potentially survive without that City of Barrie funding from the grants. There's other partnerships and things, but from the grants for the next 2 years, if that's what it was required.
Thank you. Just a comment on that. I think that
Actually, I'll just keep you to questions if we could, please.
Okay, I'll leave it that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Morales. And I'll remind you questions, please. I'm just being funny, but.
Thank you, and for your presentation. How long have you been in Barrie? As far as I can think, you've been a visual, household name and face since I got involved in politics in 2014.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Morales. I came here in 2015, actually because of Theater by the Bay's Indie Producer Co-op.
Okay. When a company's out of pocket, and usually if you watch council, I don't usually write notes, but on the great question of my colleagues, I've had the opportunity to write some here. When a company is out of pocket for a deficit, usually if it's a bigger company, it's out of pocket deficit comes from loans and or shareholder equity assets inside the company. When it's a city, we don't go into debt, we go into debentures. It's the same thing. In the case of Theater by the Bay, sorry to be blunt, but you're here in this Dragon's Den community edition. Whose money is it? Because this, as a decision maker, not at this table, but in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, I want to know whose money it is because I want to understand the human cost. So I'm not trying to violate privacy. I'm trying to understand the impact.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councilor Morales. So we operate like any charity organization. So a deficit is just at the end of the day where your budget line is at the end of that fiscal year. To whom it is owed is I guess I actually would probably need more information myself. But the reality is, at the end of the day, I see a number on a line, and that's what we work towards. Theater by the Bay does have a line of credit, certainly, which is part of that. But a deficit is, at the end of the day, charity paperwork.
Is that a independently signed corporate line of credit to the registered organization, or is somebody, and you don't have to tell me names, but or is somebody on the board or a staff member, are they personally signed on to that line of credit as well?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councilor Morales, it's an individual.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is incredible work that the organization, also when I say you, I'm going to say it's the royal you to all of you and people who are no longer involved. Incredible work you guys have done, incredibly innovative with the bus a couple of years ago. I know that's a ways now. Incredibly way pivoting. Your rebranding was really good as well. And your marketing lately has been edgy and interesting. And I say that as a compliment. So what I see here is a bunch of really passionate, dedicated people who are out of pocket, quite literally, personally, or theoretically. Yet I have a concern with something that was said earlier to the Fredericton. And it totally shifted my conversation. I'm going to end on a happy note. I'm just going to do the Oreo effect. Yet the Theater by the Bay board, through your earlier comment, and this is a question, looks at the Fredericton as aspiring towards an $80 million facility as a goalpost that maybe Barrie should be at least make note of, if not aspire to. So let me afford you the opportunity to be clear. You, the royal you, is in a situation where you want/need the city to build an $80 to $100 million performing arts center, aspire to, yet, and I say this respectfully, the organization can't currently afford its current bills, its deficit shortfall, to the point that we're having this conversation in a really unique community setting. Can you help me understand how those two things can coexist?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councilor Morales. A performing arts center is not just for one company. It's for all of the arts. It's for the arts companies that will be here, perhaps one day after Theater by the Bay is gone. It's for the performing arts groups that have been on the cusp of losing their home for the last few years, of which there are several music groups that have been essentially without a home. The Barrie Film Festival lives at the whims and mercy of Cineplex. So the Performing Arts Center is not just for us, it's for all of us. And in terms of how, Theater by the Bay's relationship with the Performing Arts Center, that depends on what the city chooses to build. I'm using the Fredericton example as one of a community that's smaller than ours, that is doing exactly what was presented by the Performing Arts Task Force, of which Theater by the Bay will be a proud member. In terms of my expectation and my hope certainly is that once we're through the woods, the Performing Arts Center is not going to be built for a decade, probably anyway. In which case, Theater by the Bay may be the exact company that we want it to be.
And thank you for ending it that. I want to prioritize not only the survival, but the thriving of Theater by the Bay and its comparators in the community. That's more important to me than this aspirational monorail, like literally a Simpsons monorail. I want the people that make culture great, the people that live and breathe this. So I guess my question, as an extension of all my colleagues, specifically the mayors, I am in principle, again, I'm just speaking for myself, absolutely in support of initiating conversation about eliminating your deficit, letting that person sleep better at night with city taxpayer money and we kept calling it a loan, an agreement. I'm calling it it's essentially a bridge loan. It's not a payday loan. It's a bridge loan to help kickstart the organization to the potential that it aspires to be. I have personal faith in you. I know some of your board members, you definitely have some strong bench strength there with some big names who can make some big phone calls and get some big checks. But to me, that's a kickstart bridge loan. It's not a new funding source. So here's my question. And I know that has to be worked out with staff and later, but are you at a point now where if we enter into this agreement subject to approval, You can balance the budget, aka be cash positive, or at the very least have a plan that says within those 2 to 3 years of the city, that repayment, maybe first year we can't do cash neutral, but we're only going to be 5,000 negative that year, projections.
Mhm.
And then we're going to project 2, and then we're going to project a surplus of 5. Is that a possible business plan that, again, on the spot without talking to your board, that seems like a reasonable ask if council were to take this to the next step?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Morales. I mean, sort of as a joke, I would say, well, if I'm not writing the City of Barrie grant for 2 years, I'd have lots of time to do all that sort of stuff. But to be more serious, certainly that's a conversation that of course we'd be willing to have. And if it's in the name of transparency, and if that would allow council to support this funding, then that's what we're prepared to discuss.
Perfect. And last quick question, not in terms of cultural programming at all, and not in terms of auditing. I don't think this is an audit issue. I think this is, theater's not meant to be profitable. So by no means do I think it's an audit issue. What's your comfort level? And again, you got to speak without consulting with your board. What do you think might be the comfort level with Theater by the Bay sharing their financials and internal documents as needed with key city staff and council, not for public consumption? And again, I want to repeat for a third time, I don't think this is a wasting money issue, but in terms of having that oversight for a temporary amount of time, you're essentially going to have almost like a partner.
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Morales. So as a charity organization, actually all of our financials are discoverable. So you can find them online. And in fact, we have to submit our financials every year as part of the grant application. So no problem with that at all.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I'll go to Councillor Nixon and then Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Harvey. Welcome, Ian. You had a great presentation. Thank you very much. Full disclosure, I've people that know me a long time. I've never been a huge community theater fan, but I got to say you guys have converted me in the last few years. You guys do great work, and I really hope that as a council, as a city, we can help you not just grow but continue. And regardless of what, hopefully that we can come up with, whether it is some sort of grant ahead of time, loan, whatever, the last thing we want to do, the last thing I want to see is putting you in a position where it kind of puts out the fire today, but next year, because you've got a big payment to make,
just to remind you, it's questions of this presenter. So
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Could you tell me what type of private fundraising you do now? And I know that is it just with your membership, or are there other things that you're doing to help financially?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Nixon. Theater by the Bay we do a lot of fundraising through primarily individuals as well as corporate donations and sponsorships. We also do fundraising events as well. So for instance, some of you may be familiar with our Stars Come Out Gala that we used to run. That was a very popular event that's getting rebooted this year. So we look at all the different avenues that we can. But at the end of the day, it's those three, because a lot of people don't know this, but ticket sales only account for about 10% of a theater company's operating budget.
Thank you.
Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thank you. And Madam Clerk, I think I'm going to need help on this, if that's okay, because it's kind of changed and morphed throughout the conversation here. My motion would be that the funding for the arts grants be reduced by $15,000 per year until there's full repayment of, please don't use the word repayment, until essentially the city is made whole for a $68,000 contribution to Theater by the Bay. And there's a reason that I want to structure it that way. If we give you a loan, that goes on your books, it's still a deficit, still a liability for you going into your requests. If we get repaid essentially by reducing the amount we're allocating to the arts grants, then it's no longer in your hands. And I'm playing an accountant on TV right now. I'm not actually one, but I'm guessing that that would eventually become an issue for you when, at the end of the fiscal year.
Is that a question? Sorry. Through you, Chair Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall, that's certainly something greater minds than mine would need to investigate.
So, thank you. I think I'd like to structure it that way, Madam Clerk. Is there a way that you can help me speak better than I am right now?
Let me try. I would just say something along the lines that notwithstanding the annual adjudicated arts investment fund granting process, theater by the amount allocated to Theater by the Bay be reduced in an amount of $15,000 until the $68,000 shortfall is repaid back to the city. And I think we'll have to put in there that we are giving them $68,000 to be funded through the theater reserve. Craig needs to maybe Craig wants to.
And I'll go to Mr. Miller.
Through you, Chairman Harvey, to Mayor Nuttall. Just keep in mind on the city's books, doing it that way, it is a loan. It will be showed up as a receivable on our books and then paid off from that reserve over the timeline that you addressed. But it would be a loan from the city because we're not giving it directly and we have a funding source to fund it this year. We're giving it, but we're paying it back to ourselves over multiple years. So just want you to be clear on our financial statements. It would be buried. It would call that as a loan.
So, are we able to structure it so that it's a $68,000 contribution in 2024? And the funding for the arts grants, I'm sorry, I don't know the right verbiage here, is reduced by $15,000 a year. The actual funding to the arts grants is reduced by $15,000 a year until such a point that we hit $68,000.
So if you're going to fund it this year, $68,000, you gotta identify a funding source. So let's say you wanted to say 68. I think there was an email circulated that identified a certain reserve. So you could fund it from that reserve, but then pay back that reserve over the next few years. So it's a grant today, fully funded.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure which reserve it was. Ms. Schlichter, I think you might be.
The theater reserve.
It was a theater reserve. See, to make it clean, if you fund it 68,000 from that reserve done for 2024, and then give a motion for us to then contribute to that reserve by reducing.
That's what I want to do. So if you will accept that, Mr. Chair, as the motion, then I think that I'm comfortable with that approach going forward. I also want to say Councilor Morales has been looking at working on some of the ideas on how to increase the actual operational funding versus the capital. I'm allergic to dipping into a sustained reduction of the capital side in the near future, because I think that it's something that we consistently hear over and over and over again. A step in here, we pay ourselves back going forward. I can wrap my head around, but I don't want to be taking money that we're telling everybody we're taking from other reserves for a building for this group and many others, and then just starting to give it out as in an operational way. So I prefer this approach. I probably didn't think it was going to go this way when we came here, but I prefer this approach overall.
Great. Is there any other comments? Councillor Corser.
First off, hi Ian, good to see you. Glad you're here. This is an emergency fund, correct? Like you would not be standing in front of us
No.
if this had gone through like you were expecting it to, like it traditionally does, like it was just a shock and awe that you did not receive this funding?
Through you, Chair Harvey, to Councillor Corser, that's correct.
Thank you. The question that I had was maybe about surrounding the motion that we're putting forward. What, taking that $15,000 out of the name of the fund escapes me right now. Okay, the art grant for the
grants.
City of Barrie. This, my understanding is it goes in front of adjudication committee to give out the money to, they decide on who receives the funding. If we're taking $15,000 out of the this fund, then does that not affect all the arts community? Not just the repayment, or how we're kind of trying to reframe the repayment. So that kind of, the question is, would that not take away from the fund itself for other arts in our city?
I don't know if,
If I may,
you would like
The
to
answer
take a
is yes.
stab at that, Mayor?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It does reduce the total funds out for the arts in those years. My expectation would be that the arts art grants committee would
There's a selection, I believe there's a jury.
Jury?
An arts and culture grant jury, yeah.
would be fully knowledgeable of that situation, especially considering one of them sitting in front of us right now.
Okay, I just was a little concerned about maybe the effects of having this come back to all the arts. So, okay, carry on.
But just to put a little color, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Schlichter, I believe the 2024 budget for that fund was just over $230,000, and obviously 15,000 is quite a small portion of that 230,000. Am I correct in saying that?
Chair Harvey, that is correct. The allocated funding was just over $230,000 this year.
Great, thank you. Is there any comments about the motion that's on the floor from members of committee? Any non-member? Oh, hang on. Actually, I'll go to Councillor Kungle first because she's on committee. Councillor Kungle, go ahead.
Just quickly, do we need to put a timeline to that, or can staff speak to how quickly that money can move? So appreciating that Ian's identified September, you want those books cleaned up from an audit perspective to make sure that if he's submitting financials for a grant, that everything is intact.
I don't know which staff member would like to take a stab at that, CAO?
Mr. Miller, how fast can you get the check out the door?
Well, I guess the motion goes to general committee and then it goes to council. And then we can cut a check. I don't think there's a requirement that any financials be submitted, so once council
So just
approves.
visits. Perfect. Thank you.
If I can I just speak briefly
Go
about
ahead,
this?
go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Regardless of what happens, obviously, I'm extremely grateful for this discussion, for the questions. I would just ask and urge perhaps that my fellow arts groups not get dinged by this, and that the grant at least remain the same, if not grow, regardless of what happens here today. There's lots of arts organizations that are working incredibly hard and do amazing work here, that I believe personally are underfunded but through that program. And while we're grateful for it, I think that just needed to be said out loud.
Great, thank you. And I'll be quite honest with you. You've been very open and honest. And even when you mentioned that the reason where you are today is because it's a Theatre by the Bay issue, obviously we appreciate your very open and candidness, the way that you've presented yourself, because we don't necessarily always have that here. So I do appreciate that.
That's what I try to do.
If we can try and keep it quick, just because we're already past time, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. Ms. Cook, it's an amendment on a presentation. I'm just wondering the technicalities. Sorry, on an open delegation, I was just wondering how it works. Like, obviously, there's an appetite to do it now, but.
Through Chair Harvey to Councillor Morales. Members of committee can certainly put a motion on the floor or recommendation on the floor concerning the content of an open delegation.
Perfect. Thank you. And very quickly, I'll just say a couple comments. I'm supportive of the approach, Ian, with all the things that we talked about. I still think there needs to be a discussion about, there's an opportunity cost, kind of the very genuine and authentic point you made of like, let not other organizations be affected by the reallocation of money. I'm not speaking for finance, but the reality, there's an opportunity cost. There's only so much money. So the answer is yes, they will be affected, even if on some micro scale. Taking that point to the 2.5 million per year, that's a community benefits fund. The name has changed, but this is money that we get.
So I'll just ask that if you have a question of the presenter, please ask the question, or if it's a question about the motion that's on the.
So earlier you said you were allowing comments, not less than 4 minutes ago. So I'm just following your.
Yeah, but what you've started to do is to have a conversation with the presenter, and it's always been, the presenter is here to present, and it's been solely questions of the presenter.
Okay, so just angle myself this way. So I think we're at a point where it's an important point to have this discussion. I'm not a voting member on this committee, but I think it's, let's try this approach. We're going to learn something about this organization, and they're going to keep doing the great work they do. But moving forward, there's no point in having an incredible generational building if in 10, 15 years, the organizations didn't survive to perform in it. And I think the priority has to be on the people. And because we don't live in a perfect world, opportunity cost means that maybe some of that, and I don't necessarily have a number in mind, some of that gets shifted towards the people that are our city, the people that are running these organizations. And maybe that either just means a re-envisioned idea of what that future building might be, because these are tough conversations. So I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you. And did you, no? Okay, so that being said, there's no further comments. I'll just ask all those in favor. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your presentation, sir.
Thank you to all members of committee, members of council, and all the staff that work behind the scenes to make this happen. Thank you.
And we will move on to the two items that were held. The first item that was held was a deferred item, 5.1, which is memorandum, memorandum from circulation list, February 21st, key performance indicators for council's 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. Can I have a member put it on the floor, please?
I will put the motion on the floor.
Thank you. The motion's on the floor. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I have a motion to refer this back to staff, just as there's some other work that needs to be done before it's presented to general committee.
Okay, we have a referral motion on the floor. It's not debatable. I don't know if you, yeah, and I'll call the vote. All those in favor, and that passes unanimously. The other item that was held was 9.2, which is a community project fund submission from Councilor Morales, installation of automated external defibrillator at Painswick Park. And I believe you held that one, Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mr. Chair. And I'll put 9.2 on the floor. And I'm just going to confirm that I can do this. Can I refer this back to staff for supplementary information and for it to report back to general committee? Is that a motion that we can approve here at this committee?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. So I'll speak to what I'm looking for here. We all have been given information with regards to defibrillators in parks. I think what Councilor Morales is trying to do is something that not only is a good thing, but it's something that's happening in other places. And for me, I would like to understand some of the recommendations or at least information provided by our public servants in relation to other places and the information that they've got from public servants. And that brought back to general committee, so we don't slow this down. But at the same time, I'm a little perplexed. And to put it in perspective, I spoke with our close friend in Oromadante today, and as Worship Randy Greenlaw, and I asked him, how many of these parks do you have these devices in? And they have 5 parks with these devices. 2 of them, I think, only 2 of them are year round, but 2 of them are year round. And to put in perspective, Shellswell Park, for those who are aware, is one of the places they have them with an attachment to some sort of electricity source that keeps it heated throughout the winter months, etc. And Shellswell Park is probably the same size as Bursey Park, just down the street from here. This isn't a large park. It's kind of sort of a waterfront park, but it's very rocky. It does have an ice, the community does an ice rink there in the winter time. And in the summertime, it's literally just got a play structure for the kids. And they managed to put this in there. So when I look at Painswick Park and what Councilor Morales is trying to do there, and what other councillors, quite frankly, to be fair to everyone on the table, have been talking about in their own wards, I wonder how Oromadante was able to do it and we're not. And I would like that information back at the general committee meeting, that we would project this actual committee report to go to. So Madam Clerk, what date would that be?
Through Mayor Nuttall, you could just provide a date for staff to report back to general committee. The next one obviously is May 8th. Then there's a week off, so just bear with me for a minute. I'm just going to look at the calendar.
Why don't we aim for May 8th then?
Okay.
And that would be, my motion is that it's referred to staff for a report back with the information on how others are able to do it.
Great. So there's a referral motion on the floor and it's non-debatable. So I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. How much time do you want? 5 minutes? So this concludes the Finance and Responsible Governance Committee. This meeting is adjourned and General Committee will start at 7:20 p.m. Oh, so I've been now told 7:25 p.m.